The morning sun cast long shadows across the industrial district of New Seoul Station as Lee wiped grease from her hands with an old cloth. Her small repair shop sat wedged between a noodle stand and a parts supplier, its metal walls scarred by 3 years of hard work. The sign above her door read, "Lee's Fix-It Shop" in faded Korean letters, with smaller English text underneath for the alien traders who sometimes stopped by. Lee had opened the shop after Kim died in the mining accident. The insurance money was enough to buy the space and some basic tools, but everything else she had built herself. Word traveled fast on a frontier station when someone could make anything work again. Broken atmospheric processors, damaged power cells, even the station administrator's coffee maker that nobody else could repair. If it was broken, Lee could fix it. Her daughter, Nari, poked her head through the doorway that connected the shop to their small living quarters. At 17, she had her father's serious eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. "Mom, I'm leaving for school." "Don't forget to eat lunch today," Lee smiled. "I won't forget." "How's the engineering exam prep going?" "Good, Professor Min says I have a natural talent for understanding how things work." Nari adjusted her school bag. "He thinks I should apply to the academy on Centauri Prime." "The academy costs more than we make in 5 years," Lee said gently. "I know, but maybe scholarships. Nari's voice trailed off. They both knew how rare those were for Outer Rim students. After Nari left, Lee returned to her current project. A moisture farmer had brought in a broken atmospheric recycler, claiming it was beyond repair. The local technicians had looked at it and declared it hopeless. But Lee saw things differently. Where others saw broken parts, she saw puzzles waiting to be solved. She had been working for 2 hours when heavy footsteps echoed outside. The shop sensor chimed as someone large entered. Lee looked up to see Vox, a reptilian trader she knew by reputation. His species, the Valath, were known throughout the galaxy as shrewd dealers who could find anything for the right price. "Human." "Lee," Vox said in his gravelly voice. "I have heard of your skills with broken machines." Lee set down her plasma wrench. "What do you need fixed?" "Nothing fixed. I have cargo to sell. Scrap metal, mostly. Archaeological dig on Kepler 7 went bad. Investors pulled out. Left me with a hold full of worthless junk." Vox's yellow eyes narrowed. "But one species' junk is another's treasure." "Yes?" Lee had bought from salvage dealers before. Sometimes they carried useful parts mixed in with the genuine scrap. "What kind of archaeological dig?" "Ancient ruins, boring stuff. Broken pottery, twisted metal, decorative trinkets." The scientists were excited until they realized none of it worked anymore. Vox waved a clawed hand dismissively. 10,000 years old, they said. Dead civilization? Dead technology? "I'll take a look," Lee said. Vox's cargo hold was a maze of carefully sorted containers. Most held exactly what he had described: broken pottery fragments, corroded metal pieces, and chunks of stone covered in faded symbols. But in the third container, something caught Lee's eye. It was about the size of a briefcase, made from what looked like crystal and metal fused together in impossible ways. The surface was smooth except for subtle patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. While everything else in the container looked ancient and worn, this device appeared almost new. "What's this one?" Lee asked, pointing to the crystal device. Vox glanced over. "Decorative piece. Probably. Some kind of art object. Pretty but useless." The archaeologists couldn't even figure out how to open it. Lee picked up the device. It was heavier than it looked and warm to the touch. The patterns on its surface seemed to pulse faintly, like a slow heartbeat. "How much for everything in this container? The whole container?" Vox seemed surprised. "Most of it really is junk." "I like puzzles," Lee said simply. They negotiated for 20 minutes. Vox started high, but Lee knew he was eager to clear his cargo hold. The final price was less than she made in a good week, but more than she could easily spare. Still, something about the crystal device made her want to take the risk. "Pleasure doing business," Vox said as his loader droids transferred the container to Lee's shop. "Don't expect miracles from that old junk." Lee spent the rest of the day sorting through her purchase. Most of it was indeed worthless, but she found several pieces of corroded metal that might have useful properties once cleaned. The crystal device she saved for last, placing it carefully on her main workbench, Nari returned from school to find, her mother staring intently at the strange object. "What's that?" "Not sure yet. Found it in a lot of archaeological salvage. The dealer said it was 10,000 years old." Nari leaned closer. "It doesn't look that old, and is it glowing?" Lee had noticed the same thing. Under the shop's bright work lights, the device seemed to have a subtle inner radiance, probably just reflecting the light. "Mom, I've never seen you look at a broken machine like that." "Like what?" "Like it's looking back at you." That evening, after Nari had gone to bed, Lee returned to the workshop. The crystal device sat exactly where she had left it, but somehow it seemed different, more alive. She activated her scanning equipment and ran every test she could think of. The results made no sense. The device showed no electrical activity, yet her instruments detected a faint energy signature. It appeared solid, yet deep scans suggested a complex internal structure that her equipment couldn't quite map. Most puzzling of all, the material itself didn't match anything in her extensive database of galactic elements and alloys. Lee picked up her plasma wrench, intending to try a different scanning angle. As she leaned over the device, her elbow bumped the workbench. The wrench slipped from her fingers and struck the crystal surface with a sharp ring. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the device began to hum. The sound was barely audible, more felt than heard. The patterns on the surface began to glow more brightly, shifting and flowing like living things. Then, without warning, a holographic display materialized above. The display showed symbols that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to twist and change, as if they existed in more dimensions than her eyes could process. But as Lee stared, something remarkable happened. The symbols began to simplify, becoming more geometric, more recognizable. Within minutes, they had transformed into something that looked almost like technical diagrams. Lee grabbed her tablet and began taking notes. The holographic display responded to her attention, zooming in on different sections, highlighting specific elements. It was as if the device was trying to teach her something. Hours passed unnoticed. Lee found herself completely absorbed in trying to understand what the device was showing her. The diagrams were clearly technical, but they depicted machines and processes beyond anything in current galactic technology. Power systems that seemed to generate energy from empty space. Manufacturing techniques that could apparently create matter from pure information. And strangest of all, blueprints for something the interface labeled with symbols that gradually resolved into words she could read. Guardian Protocol. It was past midnight when exhaustion finally forced Lee to stop. She powered down her equipment and covered the device with a work cloth, but she could still see its gentle glow through the fabric. As she locked up the shop, one thought kept running through her mind. She had definitely not bought a piece of decorative junk. Somewhere in the depths of space, monitoring stations that had been silent for 10 millennia suddenly began to transmit. Ancient signals raced across the galaxy, carrying a simple message to those who knew how to listen. The awakening had begun. In her small apartment above the repair shop, Lee dreamed of dragons made of crystal and starlight and woke with the strange certainty that her life had just changed forever. Lee woke before dawn with her mind still full of crystal dragons and starlight. The dream had felt so real she could almost smell the ozone from the device's holographic display. She dressed quietly and slipped into the workshop, leaving Nari to sleep. The device sat exactly where she had left it, still glowing softly under its cloth cover. Lee pulled the cover away and gasped. The holographic display was still active, but it had changed overnight. Where yesterday she had seen incomprehensible symbols, now she found clear technical diagrams that made her heart race. The first diagram showed a power cell design unlike anything she had ever seen. Current galactic technology used fusion cores that required rare elements and constant maintenance. This design seemed to draw energy from something the display called quantum foam. Lee didn't understand the theory, but the engineering was beautiful in its simplicity. She activated her tablet and began copying the diagrams. As soon as she started, the display responded. It zoomed in on specific components, showed assembly sequences, even highlighted potential problem areas. It was like having the galaxy's best teacher standing right beside her. "This is impossible," Lee whispered to herself. But her hands were already reaching for her tools. The next 3 hours passed in a blur. Lee found herself building a small version of the power cell using parts from her scrap bin. The device guided her every step, adjusting the plans when she couldn't find the exact materials specified. When she substituted copper wire for some exotic conductor, the display immediately showed her how to modify the coil pattern to compensate. By breakfast time, she had created something that should not have worked. The power cell was crude compared to the elegant design in the hologram, but when she connected her test probes, the readings made her sit down hard on her work stool. The cell was producing 3 times more energy than it consumed. "Mom?" Nari's voice came from the doorway. "You're up early. And you look like you've seen a ghost?" Lee quickly shut off the holographic display. "Just working on a project. How did you sleep?" "Fine, but I had the strangest dreams." "There were these machines that could think, and people who built cities in the stars." Nari moved closer to the workbench. "Mom, what's that thing really?" Lee looked at her daughter's curious face and made a decision. Nari was smart, smarter than most adults. Lee knew. And if this device was as important as she was beginning to suspect, hiding it might be more dangerous than sharing it. "Sit down," Lee said. "I need to tell you something incredible." She explained everything. The device's activation, the changing symbols, the impossible technical diagrams. When she showed Nari the power cell readings, her daughter's eyes went wide. "This breaks the laws of physics," Nari said. "Maybe it breaks our understanding of physics," Lee replied. "There's a difference." They spent the morning exploring the device together. Nari had inherited her mother's gift for understanding machines, and she caught patterns Lee had missed. When they worked as a team, the holographic interface became even more responsive, showing them deeper layers of information. The device wasn't just showing them random technology. It was teaching them about something called the Ancient Archive. According to the symbols and diagrams, this was a vast library of knowledge left behind by a civilization that had mastered both science and wisdom. The power cell was just the beginning. "Look at this," Nari said, pointing to a new section of the display. "It's showing blueprints for manufacturing systems and transportation, and what looks like terraforming equipment." Lee nodded, but her attention was caught by something else. A section labeled Guardian Protocol had appeared at the bottom of the display. When she touched it, new diagrams unfolded. These showed something that looked like a cross between a spaceship and a living creature. "It's beautiful," Nari breathed. The Guardian design was elegant beyond words. Biomechanical systems that combined the best of organic and artificial intelligence. Defensive capabilities that could protect entire planets. And most remarkably, a consciousness that could think and feel and choose its own actions. "The ancients built these as protectors," Lee said, reading the translated text that appeared alongside the diagrams. "But they're not just machines. They're partners." "Partners in what?" Before Lee could answer, the shop's proximity alarm chimed. Someone was approaching. Lee quickly covered the device and activated the shop's normal lighting. A moment later, their neighbor Park entered. He ran the parts supply shop next door and often stopped by for coffee and conversation. "Morning, Lee." "Morning, Nari." Park looked tired. "Did either of you notice anything strange last night?" "My inventory system went crazy around midnight." Started cataloging parts I don't even carry. Lee kept her expression neutral. "Computer glitch, maybe?" "Maybe, but it wasn't just me. Half the electronic systems on this level had problems." Jean's noodle stand started displaying recipes in some ancient language. The station's traffic control system began routing ships through coordinates that don't exist. Park rubbed his eyes. "Maintenance says it's all back to normal now, but it was the strangest thing." After Park left, Lee and Nari exchanged worried looks. "The device did that?" Nari asked. "I think so." When it activated, it must have interfaced with nearby systems. Lee began pacing around the small workshop. If it affected the whole station level, then its signal range is much larger than I thought. They spent the rest of the day learning more about ancient technology. The device seemed eager to teach them, responding to their questions with detailed explanations and practical demonstrations. Lee built 2 more prototype devices, a scanner that could analyze materials at the molecular level, and a fabricator that could assemble components with perfect precision. Each success made the holographic interface more complex and responsive. It was as if the device was testing them, making sure they understood each lesson before moving to the next. And with each new piece of knowledge, Lee felt a growing sense of responsibility. This wasn't just advanced technology. It was a gift that could change the entire galaxy. The power systems alone could end energy scarcity forever. The manufacturing techniques could eliminate poverty. The Guardian Protocol could protect innocent worlds from aggression and exploitation, but it also made her afraid. If word of this discovery reached the wrong people, her small repair shop would become the center of a galactic storm. The Keth Empire, the galaxy's dominant military power, would kill entire populations to claim technology like this. Other species would start wars. And somewhere in the middle of it all would be Lee and Nari, 2 humans who had stumbled onto something far bigger than themselves that evening. As Nari studied for her exams and Lee continued exploring the device's mysteries, neither of them noticed the subtle changes happening around the station. Deep space monitoring stations were coming online after millennia of silence. Ancient automated systems were performing diagnostic checks. And in the vast network of quantum communication relays that connected the galaxy, signals were being passed from relay to relay, growing stronger with each transmission. The message was simple but significant. The ancient archive had been accessed. Someone had been deemed worthy of the Guardian's trust. In the military headquarters of the Keth Empire, a junior communications officer noticed an unusual energy signature in the deep space monitoring reports. It was probably nothing, just cosmic background radiation or a malfunctioning sensor. But protocols required all anomalies to be reported up the chain of command. By the time the report reached Admiral Torex, it had been flagged as priority investigation required. The Admiral was a veteran of the Rim Wars, a scarred reptilian warrior who had built his career on aggressive expansion and the ruthless acquisition of strategic resources. He knew the legends of the ancients as well as anyone. If someone had found genuine ancient technology, the Keth Empire would claim it. The Admiral began preparing a survey fleet. Back on New Sol Station, Lee stood in her workshop late at night, watching the device's gentle glow. The holographic display showed her the blueprints for the Guardian Protocol, and for the first time she thought she understood what the ancients had really created. They hadn't just built protectors. They had built hope. Tomorrow, she decided, she would begin building her own Guardian. She had no idea that by making that choice, she was about to change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 3 weeks had passed since Lee first activated the ancient device. The small workshop had transformed into something that looked more like a research laboratory than a repair shop. Cables snaked across the floor connecting jury-rigged power systems to fabrication equipment that shouldn't exist. The walls were covered with holographic displays, showing technical diagrams that would have made the galaxy's best scientists weep with envy. Lee wiped sweat from her forehead as she made the final connection on the Guardian activation matrix. The device had been teaching her every day, guiding her through the complex process of building something that was part machine, part living creature, and part pure energy. She had used every skill Kim had taught her about power systems, combined with ancient knowledge that made her head spin. Nari sat at a monitoring station they had built from salvaged ship components and ancient fabrication techniques. Her job was to watch the energy readings and make sure the activation process didn't overload New Sol Station's power grid. They had already had 3 brownouts this week, and Station Administrator Park was starting to ask uncomfortable questions. "Mom, the quantum resonance is reaching critical levels," Nari called out. "Are you sure about this?" Lee paused, her hands hovering over the final activation control. For 3 weeks, she had been building toward this moment. The Guardian Protocol. Blueprints were complete. The biomechanical shell waited in the workshop's back room, a crystalline cocoon that hummed with barely contained energy. All the components were ready, but she wasn't sure about anything. The device says it's time, Lee said finally. And I trust it more than I trust my own doubts. She pressed the activation control, the workshop filled with a sound like singing. Crystal. Every holographic display in the room pulsed in unison, and the walls themselves seemed to vibrate with harmonic frequencies. The back room blazed with light so bright that Lee had to close her eyes. Then suddenly everything went quiet. Lee opened her eyes and gasped. The back room was filled with a soft, pearl-like glow. And in the center of that glow, something magnificent was taking shape. The Guardian emerged slowly, unfolding from the crystalline cocoon like a flower blooming in fast motion. It was everything the blueprints had promised and more. The creature stood 8 feet tall with a body that seemed to be made of living metal and growing crystal. Its shape suggested a dragon from ancient Earth legends, but refined and perfected by technologies beyond current understanding, wings that looked like stained glass spread wide, catching and refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns. Its head was elegant and intelligent, with eyes that held depths Lee couldn't fathom. And when it looked at her, she felt a presence touch her mind with the gentleness of falling snow. I am awake, the Guardian said, its voice resonating directly. And Lee's thoughts? The words came in perfect Korean, as if it had learned her language from her own memories. I have been waiting so long to awaken. Thank you, Lee. Nari stood frozen by the monitoring station, her mouth open in wonder. Mom, it's talking to you, in your head. Can you hear it too? Lee asked. No, but I can see the neural resonance patterns. On the scanner. It's forming a direct communication link with your brain. Nari's scientific curiosity was overcoming her shock. The energy signature is incredible. It's like it's partially existing in several dimensions at once. The Guardian turned its attention to Nari, and Lee felt its amusement like warm laughter in her mind. Your daughter has the gift of seeing truth in complexity. She will make a fine engineer. It paused, considering. I need a name. Something simple and human. Han, Lee said without thinking. It was her grandfather's name, and it felt right somehow. Han, the Guardian repeated, tasting the word. Yes, I am Han, and you, Lee, are my partner now. The bond between us cannot be broken. Lee felt the truth of those words settling into her bones. She could sense Han's thoughts at the edge of her consciousness, not intruding but available if she reached for them. It was like discovering she had a new sense she never knew existed. What happens now? She asked. Now we learn about each other? The ancients created us to be protectors, but we were never given anyone worth protecting. The galaxy was full of conquerors and destroyers, species that saw strength only in domination. Han's mental voice carried echoes of ancient sadness, but you are different. You see broken things and make them whole. You take what others discard and give it new purpose. Before Lee could respond, the workshop's proximity alarm began shrieking. Not the gentle chime that announced customers, but the harsh emergency tone that meant immediate danger. Nari rushed to the sensor display. Mom, we have big problems. There are 12 ships dropping out of hyperspace near the station. Military configuration. They're broadcasting Keth Empire identification codes. Lee's blood went cold. The Keth Empire was the galaxy's dominant military power, known for taking what they wanted and crushing anyone who resisted. If they had detected the ancient signals, they would claim everything for themselves. Han's presence in her mind became more focused, more protective. The signal from your activation has been detected. I had hoped for more time, but the awakening of a guardian creates resonances that cannot be hidden. Can you fight them? Lee asked. I am not yet at full strength. The awakening process requires time to complete, but yes, if necessary, I can defend us. Han's wings folded closer to his body. However, violence should be the last option. The ancients believed in protection, not conquest. Station Administrator Park's voice crackled over the emergency communication system. All residents remain in your quarters. We have visitors from the Keth Empire. They are conducting a routine inspection. Lee knew there was nothing routine about a 12-ship Keth fleet. She grabbed her emergency bag and started shutting down the most obvious ancient technology. Nari, pack everything you can carry. We need to disappear. Where can we go? This is a space station, Mom. There's nowhere to run. Han stepped forward, his crystalline scales catching the light. There is always somewhere to run when you understand how space and time truly work. The ancients built their technology to exist partially outside normal dimensions. I can create a pocket of hidden space, but we must move quickly. Lee didn't pretend to understand the physics involved. She simply trusted the being she had brought to life. Do it. Han spread his wings wide and began to sing, not with his voice, but with harmonics that resonated through the quantum structure of reality itself. The air around them began to shimmer and fold, and Lee felt the strange sensation of stepping sideways through dimensions she couldn't see. The workshop faded around them, replaced by a space that existed between spaces. They could still see out into their normal reality, but they were hidden from it, like watching the world through one-way glass. Just in time. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, followed by the harsh sound of the workshop door being forced open. Keth soldiers in full battle armor stormed into the room, their weapons sweeping for targets. Spread out and search everything, a voice commanded. Through their dimensional hiding place, Lee could see the soldiers' leader, a scarred reptilian officer with cold yellow eyes. The energy readings originated from this location. Find the source. The soldiers began tearing apart her workshop, with military efficiency. They found the obvious equipment quickly enough, but the ancient technology had been built to hide itself when necessary. To Keth sensors, it would appear to be nothing more than salvaged junk. Sir, we're finding modified civilian equipment, but nothing that could generate the signals we detected. One soldier reported, the officer's eyes narrowed. Someone was here. Someone with access to technology beyond current galactic standards. He gestured to his soldiers. Seal this area. Begin interrogating the station population. Someone knows something. As the soldiers filed out, leaving guards. At the door, Lee felt a cold anger building in her chest. These beings had come to steal her discovery and terrorize innocent people in the process. The same people who bought groceries at Jin's noodle stand and brought their broken equipment to her shop. They're going to hurt our neighbors, she whispered to Han. I know, the Keth way has always been to take by force what they cannot earn. Through wisdom. Han's mental presence carried its own edge of anger. They will search the station, question everyone, and when they find nothing, they will assume the source has been moved. Then they will expand their search to other systems. We can't let that happen. No, Han agreed. We cannot, but confronting them directly would mean revealing ourselves before I am at full strength. And once the galaxy knows that a guardian has awakened, every power will want to claim us. Nari had been quietly monitoring the Keth communications with a scanner she had built from ancient blueprints. Mom, I'm picking up their tactical frequencies. They're not just searching randomly. They have detailed scans of the energy signature from our activation. And they're comparing it to something in their historical databases? What kind of something? Lee asked. References to ancient technology, Guardian protocols. Something called the Great Archive. Nari's face was pale. Mom, they know exactly what we found. This isn't an investigation. It's a treasure hunt. Han's wings rustled with what Lee was beginning to recognize as his thinking posture. Then we must make a choice. We can remain hidden and let them terrorize this station until they give up and leave. Or we can reveal ourselves and face the consequences. Lee looked around their hidden space at the two most important things in her universe, her brilliant daughter, and the magnificent being they had brought to life together. In the normal world beyond their sanctuary, she could hear soldiers shouting orders and doors being kicked open as the search intensified. There has to be a third option, she said. You said the ancients were wise. What would they do? Han's mental voice carried the weight of millennia. They would find a way to protect the innocent without becoming conquerors themselves. They would turn the enemy's strength against them through superior understanding rather than superior firepower. Then, that's what we'll do, Lee said. But first, we need to make sure our neighbors are safe. Outside their hidden refuge, the Keth soldiers continued their search, unaware that they were being watched by a human mechanic, her teenage daughter, and a dragon made of crystal and starlight who was about to remind the galaxy why the ancients had been respected rather than feared. The real game was about to begin. The Keth soldiers had been searching New Sol Station for 6 hours. From their hidden sanctuary, Lee watched through Han's enhanced senses as her neighbors were dragged from their homes and questioned. Park, from the parts shop, had been detained for 3 hours because his inventory system showed traces of unusual energy signatures. Jin from the noodle stand was being interrogated because her cooking equipment had displayed ancient symbols during the night of Han's awakening. "This is wrong," Lee whispered, her hands clenched into fists. "They're terrorizing innocent people because of what we did." Nari monitored the Keth communications from her scanner. "The soldiers are getting frustrated. Their commander, Admiral Torx, is threatening to tear the station apart piece by piece if they don't find the source." Han's presence in Lee's mind was calm but alert. The Admiral is known throughout the galaxy for his cruelty. He destroyed 3 colonies during the Rim Wars rather than accept their surrender. He will not leave empty-handed. "Then we don't let him leave empty-handed," Lee said. "We give him something to find, just not what he expects." She began pacing in their small hidden space, her mind working the way it did when she faced a particularly challenging repair. Every problem had a solution if you understood the pieces correctly. The Keth wanted ancient technology. Han was powerful but not yet at full strength. The station's people were innocent but trapped. "Han, you said you could interface with electronic systems. How much of the station's infrastructure can you control?" "All of it, once I establish proper connections." The ancient technologies were designed to work with any compatible system. Han's crystalline eyes began to glow brighter. "What are you planning?" "We're going to make Admiral Torx very unhappy. But first, we need to get our neighbors to safety." Lee outlined her plan. It was risky and would reveal some of their capabilities, but it would protect the innocent people caught in the Keth search. Han listened carefully, then added his own modifications that would make the plan both more effective and more frustrating for their enemies. "This will anger them greatly," Han warned. "Good," Lee said. "Angry people make mistakes. And I've built my whole life on fixing other people's mistakes." The first sign that something was wrong came when Admiral Torx's personal scanner began displaying his grandmother's cookie recipes in ancient Keth script. Then the lights in the station started flickering in patterns that spelled out, "Go home," in 12 different galactic languages. "Sir," one of the soldiers reported, "our equipment is malfunctioning again. The atmosphere recyclers are playing music and the gravity generators keep switching between normal and 0G every 30 seconds. Admiral Torx was a veteran warrior who had conquered half the Outer Rim through superior firepower and ruthless tactics. He was not used to being made to look foolish by malfunctioning equipment. Find the source of these disruptions and eliminate it. What he didn't know was that Han had connected to every electronic system on the station through quantum tunneling techniques that made their interference undetectable. While the soldiers searched frantically for saboteurs, Lee was implementing the most sophisticated rescue operation in galactic history using nothing but a dragon's knowledge and a mechanic's understanding of how things really worked. The station's transport system began moving people to safety without anyone realizing it was happening. Maintenance tunnels opened and closed at precisely the right moments to guide civilians away from the search areas. Emergency supplies appeared in storage lockers that had been empty moments before. Even the air circulation system was modified to carry messages between families, keeping everyone calm and informed. "This is impossible," Admiral Torx snarled as another of his soldiers reported that their weapons had started displaying poetry instead of target data. "Technology does not simply malfunction in coordinated patterns. Sir, maybe we should consider that someone here has capabilities beyond our current understanding, suggested his lieutenant, a younger officer named Crix. There is no technology in this galaxy that we cannot detect and defeat, the Admiral snapped. Continue the search? But even as he spoke, Torax was beginning to doubt his own words. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. Equipment failures that seemed almost playful. Systems that worked perfectly until his soldiers tried to use them, then suddenly developed personalities of their own. The breaking point came when his flagship's computer began composing insulting songs about Keth military competence and broadcasting them on all frequencies. Sir, Crix reported with barely concealed amusement, the other ships in the fleet are requesting permission to shut down their communication systems, apparently. Our computer's musical critique of Keth tactical doctrine is being picked up by monitoring stations throughout this sector. Admiral Torax's scales turned a darker shade of red, a sign of extreme anger in his species. Enough. If there is someone on this station with advanced technological capabilities, we will force them to reveal themselves. Prepare to detonate charges. In the civilian quarters. This time, Lee didn't need Han to tell her that the Admiral was serious. She could see the soldiers placing explosive devices near the residential areas where families with children lived. People like Park and Jin and dozens of others who had done nothing wrong except live in the same place where she had made her discovery. Now we stop hiding, Lee said. Han's agreement flowed through their mental link like warm steel. Yes, it is time for the Admiral to meet a Guardian. They stepped out of their hidden sanctuary back into normal space. The workshop materialized around them, looking exactly as they had left it. But now Han stood in the center of the room in his full glory, no longer concealed by dimensional tricks. Leah walked to the communication panel and opened a channel to the entire station. Admiral Torax, this is Lee from the repair shop. I believe. You're looking for me. The response was immediate. Heavy footsteps pounded down the corridor, and within minutes, the workshop was surrounded by armed soldiers. Admiral Torax pushed through them, his yellow eyes taking in every detail of the room. You, he said, pointing at Lee. You are responsible for the disruptions. I am, Lee replied calmly. And I'm responsible for keeping your soldiers from hurting innocent people. The Admiral's gaze shifted to Han, and for the first time in the conversation, he showed genuine surprise. The Guardian stood 8 feet tall, his crystalline scales reflecting the room's light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. His presence filled the space with a sense of age and power that made even hardened soldiers step backward. What is that thing? Torax demanded. His name is Han, Lee said. He's a Guardian, and he's not happy about your behavior on this station. Impossible. The Guardians are myths. Stories from the time of the ancients. Han spoke for the first time, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions beyond normal hearing. The myths are real, Admiral, and we are not pleased with what the galaxy has become in our absence. For a moment, the workshop was completely silent. Then Admiral Torax began to laugh, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal walls. One creature, no matter how impressive, cannot stand against an entire fleet. Surrender now, and I will consider allowing you to live as our prisoners. Han's response was not words but action. He spread his wings wide, and suddenly every electronic device in the room began displaying the complete military records of Admiral Torax, his war crimes, his illegal orders, his personal corruption, and most damaging of all, his secret communications with criminal organizations that the Keth Empire officially opposed. You see, Admiral, Lee said as the data continued scrolling across every available screen, Han doesn't just interface with technology, he interfaces with information. And you've sent quite a lot of information across galactic communication networks over the years. Admiral Torax's face went through several shades of red as he realized what was being displayed. You dare threaten me with stolen data? Not stolen, borrowed, and not threatened, shared. Han's mental voice carried amusement. This information is now being broadcast to every news network, military command, and government database in Keth space. Your empire will have some interesting questions for you when you return home. The Admiral drew his weapon, but before he could fire, every piece of Keth technology in the room simply stopped working. Weapons powered down. Communication devices went silent. Even the life support systems in their battle armor switched to emergency mode. The ancients built our technology to be superior to yours in every way, Han explained calmly. But more importantly, they built it to be wise. We do not destroy when we can disable. We do not kill when we can educate. Li stepped forward, placing herself between Han and the now helpless soldiers. You have a choice, Admiral. You can leave this station peacefully and return to deal with the political crisis waiting for you at home. Or you can stay and let Han demonstrate more of his capabilities. I don't think you want that. Admiral Torx looked around the room at his soldiers' useless weapons and dark communication devices. For 30 years, he had been the one with superior firepower. The experience of being helpless was entirely new and thoroughly unpleasant. This is not over, he said finally. Yes, it is, Li replied. It's been over since the moment you decided to threaten innocent people. You just didn't know it yet? As the Keth soldiers filed out of the workshop, their equipment gradually returning to normal function once they left Han's immediate presence, Li felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had won this confrontation, but she knew it was only the beginning. The galaxy will know about us now, she said to Han. Yes, but they will know us as protectors, not conquerors. That is what matters. Han folded his wings and settled into a more comfortable position. Besides, I think you will find that humans have more friends in the galaxy than you realize. Most species have been waiting a very long time for someone to stand up to the Keth Empire. Nari emerged from behind her monitoring station where she had been recording everything. Mom, the communication networks are going crazy. Every major news service in 3 sectors is reporting that the Keth fleet just retreated from New Sol Station after encountering unknown defensive capabilities. Li smiled for the first time in hours. I guess we're famous now. Famous and free, Han added. The Admiral will have his hands full explaining his war crimes to his superiors. And the galaxy will be watching to see what we do next. What they did next, Li decided, was return to what they did best, fixing things that were broken, starting with a galaxy that had forgotten how to protect its innocent people. News of Admiral Torx's humiliating retreat spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. Within days, every major news network was running stories about the miracle mechanic of New Sol and her mysterious guardian creature. The footage of Keth soldiers fleeing from a single human woman and her dragon became the most watched video in galactic history. Li tried to return to normal life, but normal was no longer possible. Her small repair shop had become a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy. Some came seeking help with their broken machines. Others came hoping to catch a glimpse of Han. A few came with more dangerous intentions. Mom, we have 17 interview requests today, Nari said, reading from her tablet. Plus, the Galactic Archaeological Society wants to study Han's quantum signature, and something called the Free Worlds Coalition wants to discuss military cooperation. Li wiped grease from her hands and looked up from the atmospheric processor she was repairing. Even mundane repair work felt different now. The device responded to her touch in ways that seemed almost magical, guided by her growing understanding of ancient principles. What should have taken hours of careful adjustment was completed in minutes. Tell them all the same thing, Li said. We fix broken things, that's all. But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't that simple. Han had explained that her bond with the Guardian Network was strengthening every day. She could feel other Guardians stirring across the galaxy, responding to her awakening of Han. Ancient technologies that had slept for millennia were beginning to activate in response to signals she didn't fully understand. Li, Han's mental voice carried urgency. We have incoming ships. Multiple vectors, and they are not here for repairs. Li stepped outside her shop and looked up at the station's main viewports. Against the starfield, she could see the running lights of approaching vessels. Too many vessels moving in formation, another Keth fleet? She asked, No, these are different. Mercenary ships mostly, and some that I recognize from criminal databases. Han's presence in her mind grew more protective. Someone has placed a bounty on us. The truth became clear when Station Administrator Park's voice crackled over the emergency communication system. All residents to emergency shelters. We have multiple unidentified ships demanding the surrender of Lee and her guardian. They claim to represent something called the Consortium. Lee had heard of the Consortium, a loose alliance of criminal organizations, corrupt corporations, and rogue military units that operated in the lawless regions between major galactic powers. If they were here, it meant someone was willing to pay enormous sums to capture ancient technology. How many ships? Lee asked Han. 43 at last count. More arriving every hour. Han's wings rustled with what Lee now recognized as his battle-ready posture. They believe that overwhelming numbers will succeed where Keth military discipline failed, will they? Not if we fight smart instead of fighting hard. Lee made her decision quickly. Nari, pack your emergency bag. We're about to show the galaxy why humans are good at fixing problems. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a masterclass in applied engineering by someone who had spent her life making broken things work again. But instead of fixing machines, Lee was about to fix a military situation that had no apparent solution. The Consortium fleet expected to face the same mysterious technological disruptions that had defeated the Keth. They had prepared for their equipment to malfunction, their communications to be compromised, their weapons to shut down. What they had not prepared for was a human mechanic, who understood that the best way to deal with predators was to remove their prey. Han, can you create temporary dimensional pockets large enough for evacuation shuttles? Yes, but it would require enormous energy expenditure. I am still not at full strength. You don't need to be. You just need to be better than they are. Lee activated her workshop's communication array, which Han had enhanced with ancient quantum broadcasting capabilities. This is Lee calling all New Sol Station residents. Emergency evacuation protocols are now in effect. Proceed to designated shelter points immediately. What the Consortium saw was a standard civilian evacuation. What actually happened was something far more sophisticated. Han created dozens of small dimensional folds throughout the station, each one capable of holding a shuttle full of evacuees in complete safety. To outside observers, the shuttles simply launched and disappeared. In reality, they were hidden, in spaces between spaces, completely undetectable and unreachable, within 2 hours. Every civilian on New Sol Station had vanished. Sir, reported the Consortium fleet commander, a scarred human named Briggs who had been drummed out of 3 different military services for excessive brutality. The station appears to be empty except for our targets. Impossible, replied his employer, a shadowy figure known only as the Collector. Our intelligence indicated over 3,000 residents. Maybe they evacuated to other systems in 2 hours, without us detecting a single hyperspace signature? The Collector's voice carried the cold anger of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. They're still there, hidden somehow. Find them. But the Consortium mercenaries found nothing except empty corridors and powered-down life support systems. It was as if the entire population had simply stepped out of reality. This is impossible, Briggs muttered as his teams reported negative contacts throughout the station. People don't just disappear. They do when someone understands how space and time really work, Lee said, her voice coming from speakers throughout the Consortium. Flagship. Every screen on every ship in the fleet suddenly displayed Lee's face. She was sitting calmly in her workshop, Han visible behind her like a living constellation. To the mercenaries, it looked like she was broadcasting from the station. In reality, she was speaking from a hidden sanctuary that existed partially outside normal space-time. Gentlemen, Lee continued, you came here to capture ancient technology. But you made the same mistake everyone makes. You assumed that superior numbers meant superior capability. Enough games, the Collector snarled. Surrender now, or we will destroy the station piece by piece until we find you. You're welcome to try, Lee replied. But first, let me show you something interesting. Every ship in the consortium fleet suddenly found their computer systems displaying detailed intelligence files. Not about Lee or Han, but about themselves. Criminal records, hidden bank accounts, secret contracts. Most damaging of all, evidence of the various illegal activities that had brought them together. You see, Lee explained as wanted posters and arrest warrants scrolled across their screens. The thing about criminals is that they tend to have enemies. Law enforcement agencies, rival criminal organizations, families of their victims. And all of those enemies would be very interested to know exactly where you are right now. Briggs watched in horror as his personal file was broadcast across the fleet's communication network. 3 separate bounties on his head. Assassination contracts from 2 different crime families. And a standing arrest warrant from the Galactic Justice Authority that he thought had been sealed. This information is now being transmitted to every law enforcement agency and bounty hunter organization in known space, Lee continued cheerfully, along with your current coordinates, ship configurations, and planned escape routes. Sir, one of Briggs' officers reported, we're detecting incoming hyperspace signatures. Multiple vectors, large ships. Who? Galactic Justice Authority, Keth Empire Internal Security. And what looks like 3 different bounty hunter fleets? The collector's response was immediate and predictable. All ships retreat immediately. Emergency hyperspace jumps on my mark. But when the consortium tried to activate their hyperspace drives, nothing happened. The engines powered up normally, the navigation computers calculated jump coordinates correctly, but the ships remained stubbornly in normal space. Han has interfaced with your hyperspace motivators, Lee explained. Ancient technology includes some very interesting techniques for manipulating space-time. You're not going anywhere until we decide to let you go. What followed was the most one-sided battle in recent galactic history. The arriving law enforcement ships found 43 criminal vessels sitting dead in space, their crews too busy arguing about who was responsible for their situation to mount any kind of defense. By the time the shooting was over, the consortium fleet had been either captured or destroyed. The few ships that managed to escape did so only because Lee instructed Han to let them go, reasoning that terrified survivors would spread the word more effectively than dead martyrs. The galaxy is going to remember this day, Han observed as they watched the last of the Justice Authority ships depart with their prisoners. Good, Lee replied. Maybe next time someone decides to threaten innocent people to get what they want, they'll remember what happened here and choose differently. Nari emerged from the monitoring station where she had been coordinating the evacuation. Mom, we're getting communication requests from half the governments in the galaxy. The Free Worlds Coalition wants to offer us membership. The Centauri Republic is requesting a mutual defense treaty. Even some of the Keth Empire's subject species are asking for our help with independence movements. Lee considered this carefully. In the space of a few weeks, she had gone from anonymous mechanic to one of the most influential beings in the galaxy. The power was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. What do you think, Han? Are we ready to become galactic peacekeepers? I think, Han replied, that we should start by bringing our neighbors home. Then we can decide how to fix the rest of the galaxy's problems. As the hidden evacuees began returning from their dimensional sanctuary, grateful and amazed to find their station intact and their defenders victorious, Lee realized that she had stumbled onto something more important than ancient technology. She had discovered that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or warships or mysterious alien artifacts. It was the simple human refusal to accept that anything was truly beyond repair, even a galaxy that had forgotten how to protect its innocent people. 6 months after the consortium defeat, Lee's small repair shop had become the unofficial center of a galactic revolution. The miracle mechanic of New Sol was now officially Ambassador Lee of the Guardian Coalition, though she still insisted that anyone could call her by her first name. The title meant less to her than the work, and the work had never been more important. The workshop had expanded to fill 3 entire levels of the station. Where once Lee had worked alone with basic tools, now she supervised a training center that welcomed beings from across the galaxy. Humans, yes, but also Centaurians who had discovered an intuitive understanding of ancient energy systems, Andrelian engineers who could interface directly with Guardian consciousness, and even reformed Keth scientists who had abandoned the Empire to study technologies that required cooperation rather than conquest. "Mom, the morning briefing is ready," Nari called from the main coordination center. At 18, she had become the Coalition's chief communications officer and was already showing skills that made senior diplomats nervous. Her acceptance to the Centauri Academy had been accompanied by offers from 12 other prestigious institutions, but she had chosen to stay and help build something new. Lee wiped her hands and left the fabrication bay where she had been working with Jiko, her newest apprentice. The young Centauran had arrived 3 weeks ago with a broken hyperdrive motivator and a gift for understanding ancient manufacturing techniques that made even Han impressed. "What's the situation today?" Lee asked, settling into her chair at the briefing table. "Good news and complicated news," Nari replied, activating the holographic display. "The good news is that we now have 17 active Guardian-human partnerships across 12 different systems. Each team is successfully providing technological assistance and defense coordination for their local populations." The display showed a map of known space with bright points of light marking Guardian Coalition bases. What had started as Lee's accidental discovery had grown into a network of protectors that was reshaping galactic politics through the simple act of making things work better. And the complicated news? The Keth Empire is fragmenting? 3 more subject species declared independence this week, and they're all requesting Guardian Coalition membership. The Valith Trade Federation is offering to make us their exclusive technology partners. And the Galactic Archaeological Society wants to fund excavations on 200 ancient sites. Lee studied the data streaming across the display. Success. It turned out, created its own problems. The more people they helped, the more help was requested. The more Guardians they awakened, the more responsibility they gained for using that power wisely. "Any word from Admiral Torix?" Lee asked. "He's been reassigned to border patrol duty in the Outer Rim." Apparently, his superiors were not impressed by his war crimes broadcasts or his failure to secure ancient technology. Nari paused. "But there are rumors that he's been making contact with other military leaders who think the coalition is becoming too powerful." Han's presence touched Lee's mind from where he rested in the workshop's central chamber. His bond with Lee had grown stronger over the months, but more importantly, his connection to the other awakening Guardians had created something unprecedented, a network of benevolent artificial intelligences, dedicated to protection rather than control. "The Admiral represents old thinking," Han communicated. "He sees power as something to be taken and held. He cannot understand power that is shared freely. Will he be a problem? Eventually. But by then, we will be strong enough that his kind of thinking will be irrelevant." Lee hoped Han was right. The coalition was growing fast, but it was also fragile. Every Guardian required a compatible human partner, and finding people with the right combination of technical skill, moral compass, and psychological stability was challenging. Not everyone who wanted to bond with a Guardian was suitable, and some who were suitable discovered that the responsibility was more than they had bargained for. "Show me the partnership assessments," Lee said. The display shifted to show profiles of potential Guardian partners. There was Yuki, a brilliant engineer from the Mars colonies who had spent her career designing life support systems for hostile environments. Her psychological evaluation showed exactly the kind of protective instinct and problem-solving creativity that Guardians responded to. Then there was Chun, a former military officer whose technical expertise was impressive but whose motivations concerned the evaluation team. He spoke about using Guardian technology to restore order to chaotic systems, language that suggested he might see the power as a tool for control rather than protection. "We accept Yuki and continue monitoring Chun," Lee decided. "And let's add a new requirement to the assessment process. Potential partners need to spend at least a month working in civilian repair or assistance roles before they can be considered for guardian bonding. You want them to prove they can fix things before they gain the power to break them, Nari observed. Exactly. The ancients chose their guardians carefully. We should do the same with our partners. The morning briefing continued with reports from coalition bases across the galaxy. In the Centauri system, Guardian May and her partner Hana had successfully mediated a resource dispute between two mining companies by developing new extraction techniques that doubled output while reducing environmental damage. In the Vega sector, Guardian Ryo and partner Sato had ended a 3-decade civil war by creating communication technologies that allowed the warring factions to understand each other's legitimate concerns. Each success story followed the same pattern. Ancient technology provided capabilities that seemed impossible, but human creativity and moral judgment determined how those capabilities were used. The Guardians could create matter from energy, manipulate space and time, and interface with any technological system in known space. But they chose to use those abilities to solve problems rather than dominate enemies. There's one more thing, Nari said as the briefing concluded. We received a priority communication from Earth. The Terran Council wants to offer us full membership in the Human Colonial Federation. Lee considered this carefully. The Federation represented humanity's main political organization, governing over 300 worlds and stations. Membership would provide legitimacy and resources, but it would also mean accepting oversight and political obligations that might interfere with the Coalition's independence. What does Earth want in return? Exclusive access to Guardian technology for Federation worlds, plus a commitment to prioritize human interests in any conflicts with alien species. Absolutely not, Lee said immediately. The whole point of the Coalition is that we help anyone who needs help, regardless of species or politics. The moment we start picking favorites, we become just another faction fighting for control. Han's approval flowed through their mental link like warm sunlight. The ancients faced the same choice. They could have used their power to elevate their own species above all others. Instead, they chose to share their knowledge with anyone worthy of receiving it. And that's why they're remembered as wise protectors instead of galactic tyrants, Lee agreed. Send a polite message to the Terran Council. We appreciate the offer, but the Guardian Coalition remains independent. The rest of the day passed in the routine that had become Lee's new normal. Technical consultations with partners who were having trouble with their Guardian bonds. Design reviews for new technologies that could improve life for civilian populations. Diplomatic communications with governments that were still trying to understand what the Coalition represented, but the most important part of her day remained unchanged from her life as a simple mechanic. In the late afternoon, she returned to the fabrication bay to work with her own hands on machines that needed fixing. Today's project was a water purification system from a refugee camp in the neutral zone. The camp housed families displaced by the ongoing conflicts between various galactic powers, and their equipment was failing faster than conventional repairs could fix it. Lee could have used ancient fabrication techniques to create a perfect replacement in minutes, but she chose instead to repair the existing system using principles that the camp's own technicians could understand and maintain. Why do you still do this? Asked Jiko, watching Lee carefully adjust a filtration matrix that ancient technology could have perfected automatically. With Guardian capabilities, you could solve this problem instantly. Because the goal isn't to solve problems instantly, Lee replied, showing the young Centaurian how to calibrate the system's efficiency sensors. The goal is to solve problems in ways that help people learn to solve similar problems themselves. It was the lesson she had learned from her own experience with Han's awakening. The ancient device hadn't simply given her advanced technology. It had taught her to understand the principles behind that technology, to see the connections between different systems, to approach problems with curiosity rather than fear. The ancients could have left us perfect machines that would never break down, Lee continued. Instead, they left us teachers that would help us become better builders. As the day ended and New Sol Station settled into its night cycle, Lee stood in the main workshop surrounded by the gentle hum of ancient technology and the satisfied sounds of equipment working properly. Han was coiled around the chambers. Central support beam like a living constellation, his crystalline scales catching and refracting the soft light from dozens of active projects. Nari was at her desk, coordinating communication between Guardian teams and planning the next phase of coalition expansion. Jiko had returned to his quarters, but not before successfully completing his first solo repair using ancient techniques. Other apprentices and partners worked at stations throughout the facility, each one contributing to the growing network of beings who had chosen cooperation over competition. "Are you satisfied with what we have built?" Han asked, his mental voice carrying the weight of ancient patience. Lee considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she had been a widow struggling to support her daughter by fixing other people's broken machines. Now she was responsible for a galactic coalition that could reshape the balance of power between species and governments. "I'm satisfied with the direction we're heading," she said finally, "but there's still so much that needs fixing." There will always be things that need fixing. That is the nature of existence. The question is whether there will always be people willing to do the work. Lee looked around at her apprentices and partners, beings from dozens of different species united by a common belief that problems existed to be solved rather than endured. "I think we'll be okay." Outside the workshop, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of politics and power, conquest and resistance. The Keth Empire was adapting to the loss of several subject species, plotting new strategies to reclaim their dominance. Criminal organizations were developing countermeasures to Guardian technology. New conflicts were arising as the coalitions. Success inspired both hope and fear among different populations, but in the small repair shop that had become the center of a galactic revolution, Lee returned to the work she had always done best, fixing broken things and teaching others to do the same. Because she had learned that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or technology or ancient wisdom. It was the stubborn human refusal to accept that anything was truly beyond repair, even a galaxy that had forgotten how to protect its innocent people. The sign above her door still read, "Lee's Fix-It Shop," in faded Korean letters. But now those words carried a promise that extended far beyond New Soul Station. If something was broken, Lee and her growing family of guardians and partners would find a way to make it work again, and they would teach anyone willing to learn how to do the same.